It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. I am so delighted you are here today. I appreciate you listening to the show very much. Got a couple of fun things coming up. We're going to talk with David Fitzgerald about his books, many books, fiction and nonfiction. His books about religion and Jesus and whether he actually existed. And we're going to weave in some quiz questions about Christmas just in time for Christmas this year. Also, for the Investing Skeptically segment, we're going to talk about my book recommendations and maybe just some general thoughts on the investment philosophy and how it works overall. And this kind of came to mind because I was talking to somebody on the phone and they said, why do you tell people for free how to invest? And it kind of struck me as an odd question. And I guess the answer is because that's what I do. I've always done that. The very first customers that my business ever got, Polaris Financial Planning, were people that I was already giving free information to. And it just so happens that I have a bigger platform now. And I think it's important for people to understand how to invest, how to make money, how to grow their money, and how to end up with more money years down the road than they have today. And I will continue to keep doing that. And the show is free. Yes, I do have some stupid little ads that make me a couple of dollars. And if you want to avoid the ads and get the show a day earlier, you can go to patreon.com and show, a little love. Donate $1 or more. The top tier I think I have there is $6.66 an episode. And that helps offset the cost of my time a little bit, but I think I do it more for the love of it. I want to share what I know because I think if you know how to invest and you can manage to save 20%, as I say, not the 10%, or as people love to hear, the suck-ass minimum, you can eventually have enough money that you can live on your money and not your labor. And I think that's the coolest thing ever. One of the problems that I may have, and it's not that big of a problem, is that I've gotten very, very busy because of all this. Currently, my minimum for new clients is $500,000. I've considered going to $1 million. I haven't made that decision yet, but what I am going to do for about 2 months is I'm going to put I hope, a temporary pause on new clients, in part because it's Christmas and it's the end of the year, and I have to make sure that I have enough time available to help the people who are already paying me money. So the other thing is that because I am so busy, I sometimes worry that I don't have enough time and I don't want to make a bunch of money and then not have time to enjoy it. So it's all about having a balance. And I've started down this road of computer technology, how to make my business more efficient. And I often go to webinars and seminars and things, and often with the knowledge that I'm not going to learn a whole lot, but I might learn something. And you never know what you're going to learn, and it's always good to be open to new ideas, but sometimes it just turns into a sales pitch for annuities, and I wasted my time, but at least I know a little bit about that company. Well, one of the recent ones that I went to or listened to online, and I think I may have mentioned this before, was someone who does a job like me said he spent 20% of his revenue on financial technology, financial computer programs, computer systems. And I thought, what in the world could he possibly be spending that money on? One of the things that came up was something called a CRM, client relationship manager. And so I have this weird reality where there's some things that I know an awful lot about. And then there's other things that maybe I should know about, but I'm completely ignorant. And so the nice thing about this CRM technology, which a lot of you are probably laughing now because you've used them and you know them very well, is that it would help me organize my clients, my contact information, all of the contact dates, because unfortunately over the years, my entire system has been kind of cobbled together because I started with 2 or 3 clients and 5 clients and 10 clients. And so it just kind of grew the way that it was without becoming locked into organization at some point. So I think I have found the one that I'm going to use, but I need to transition to it. And so that's what I'm going to be doing after the first of the year, is trying to transition to this system that I hope will make me more efficient. However, it seems like in this world, anything that's going to make you more efficient in the short run takes a lot of time and effort to get it together and get it organized. The other thing I've been looking into is a system that will help me do billing. And so far, that has been a hysterical failure. It appears that the system that I use, which is a massive Excel spreadsheet and then a mail merge to a Word document, is apparently quite efficient. If I had to do it from scratch today, I probably would never have done that, and I would just pay for one of these softwares. But I was on a live demo with 2 salespeople telling me about how great their system was, and I thought it was just awful. Absolutely awful. It didn't have the flexibility that I have created in Excel and Word, so it would end up taking more time, not to mention the fact that they wanted a lot of money for the system that wasn't as good as something that I built. So I will keep looking at that and may implement something in the future that makes that part of my life a little more efficient, but who knows? Anyway, we're going to take a quick little break, and we're going to learn more about the books I recommend, the general investment philosophy, and then we're going to talk to David Fitzgerald.
My father, the man responsible for my education, taught me that Islam, rightly understood, is a religion and philosophy of peace. In fact, he said that for any society to be peaceful and prosperous, it had to institute the rule of God, or Sharia. I came to disagree with my father. It was a gradual process that started when I entered and lived in societies such as the Netherlands and the United States that applied man-made constitutions and laws. Both countries are peaceful and prosperous. I now disagree even more with my father that Islam is a religion of peace. When I look at the amount of security that is deployed tonight here, the amount of security that is deployed for the Richmond Marathon. 6 months ago, the Boston Marathon was bombed by 2 brothers who invoked the founding documents and the founding father of Islam. I disagree with my father when I look at the wanton killing of the Westgate Mall in Nairobi by Somali men invoking Allah and Muhammad to justify their horrid act. Kenya is the most hospitable country to Somalis fleeing their own country, so it distresses me even more. I disagree with my father when I look at the reports this week of 30 men and women worshipping in Iraq who are killed by a suicide bomber invoking the very same God and the very same prophet that they invoke. I disagree with my father when he says that Islam is a religion of peace. When I look at the 120,000 dead in Syria, Syria is now a stage of a proxy war between Islam's 2 most important and most influential nations, the Sunni Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Shia Islamic Republic of Iran. I disagree with my father that Islam is a religion of peace when I read about the almost daily reports of the destruction of churches, the pillaging of Christian property, the rape of Christian women, the terrible exodus of Christians and other religious minorities from Muslim countries. All this is done by men who invoke the founding father and founding documents of Islam. I disagree with my dear beloved father when I read about the teenage girl in Pakistan who's shot point blank in the head by a man invoking Allah and Muhammad because she wanted education. In the name of Allah and Muhammad, women are forbidden to drive. They're forbidden to own their own reproductive rights. They're forbidden to do anything unless they have permission from a male guardian. I disagree with my father that Islam is a religion of peace when I read these founding documents and I study the history and the example of the Prophet Muhammad. In there, I find an insistence of war and intolerance towards infidels, the hypocrites, those who associate God with others, homosexuals, women, and so on.
All right, everybody. This Investing Skeptically segment is a little different. I guess it's a little different. They're all different, right? Sometimes I get into detail, a lot of detail, and a lot of people really like the detail, but sometimes people don't want so much detail. They want general things. So what I'm going to give you in this next few minutes is the 4 books that I recommend that you read and kind of just my thoughts in a general philosophy of how to invest that might help you figure out what to do with your portfolio or what to do with your 401k or IRAs or whatever. So let's go right into the books. And I do recommend that you read them in order. They do generally go from easier to harder. They do go from less knowledge to more knowledge. If you really feel compelled to skip something, I can't make you read them in order, but honestly, the first book is pretty simple and straightforward. And because it's so old, it's like $4. If the $4 really breaks your bank, I have been told, I think it's still there, on YouTube, someone read the entire book, and that's called The Richest Man in Babylon. And it's a little dated, so if you're really woke, some parts of the book might be bothersome to you. But just listen for the investment ideas, the investment philosophies of why one invests and why one puts money somewhere to hope to get more money in the future, and the idea that your money can work for you. And it's a very fascinating thing for me to see that there are people who are struggling to save 10% a year, but then I also have people that have been saving money for 20, 30, 40 years. And you can get situations where, particularly in a year like what we've just had, where the market's up 25 to 28% as of the middle of December of 2019, where people make more in their portfolio, sometimes 2 or 3 times more than what they make in a year of work. And that's a very bizarre feeling. It can be very unsettling if you're new to it. Anyway, I digress. So read The Richest Man in Babylon. It's a quick and easy read. It does get repetitive in the middle, but then it picks up again. It's only a couple hours. Find a way to get through it. The next one is A Random Walk Down Wall Street. Now, the next 3 books are all originally written either in the 60s or 70s. I think maybe the last one was in the late 80s. So I do recommend these books because they've stood the test of time. They're fundamental to teaching you how things work. A Random Walk Down Wall Street is updated every few years, 5 or 6 years. So you want to get a relatively recent version. And it talks about this is a stock, this is a bond, this is how the markets work. And it does talk about types of investments that I don't recommend. And sometimes they have ideas that I don't necessarily agree with. And that's okay. You don't have to do exactly what I do, but you do need to teach yourself. So that is A Random Walk Down Wall Street. The third book is Winning the Loser's Game. And this is fundamental to the idea of how one beats the market. And the basic idea is one doesn't. And so the best way to win is not to play. So it also goes with this study that I found, and I'm so bummed that the author will not come on and do an interview. He doesn't do interviews with anybody because he thinks that his research says what he wants it to say, and he's concerned that he'll be cherry-picked and quoted out of context, and I can appreciate that. But it's the idea that if you want advice from the best investors, if you could talk to Warren Buffett, if you could talk to Peter Lynch, who used to run a big fund at Fidelity, if you could talk to any one of these people and get their ideas, that would be great. Well, what if you could talk to 5 people like this, or 10 people like this, or 100 people like this, or 1,000 people like this? If you could talk to 1,000 people like this, you would basically be getting the advice of the market itself. And so who are you to think that you know more than all the really smart people combined? It can happen, of course, but it's unlikely that you are that person. Now, if you're really, really into it, fine, go do your own thing. You're probably not listening to this show anyway. But if you can take the global averaged advice of everybody, that is the market. And as I mentioned, and I didn't finish the thought, with the research data, if you look at returns over an average month, if you start with a base of 0, and then above that is the U.S. short-term bond dividend, and that's kind of considered the risk-free rate of return. It's very low. And then you expect stocks to make above that, and generally they do. But it has been discovered that only 4% of stocks generate all of the returns above short-term treasury risk-free, air quotes, risk-free rate of return of bonds, 4% of stocks. So if you buy 5 or 10 stocks, odds are you're not going to get one of the performers. If you buy 15 or 20 stocks, odds are you're still not going to get one of the performers. Statistically, of course, you have to get the 25% to have a really good chance, or almost a certainty, never quite a certainty, that you get one of the 4%. And it's really easy to look back in time and see that Netflix, when it was almost going to go out of business, was a couple of dollars a share, and now it's $300 a share. It's really easy to see that now. How did you figure that out 10, 15 years ago? You didn't. I mean, a few people have, and they got lucky. So that's the winning the loser's game. It talks about the philosophy of how that works. And for most people, the best bet you can do is getting to the market. And then the fourth book, which has a lot of charts, graphs, data, tables, and it's the only one I insist that you get in paper format. I don't think it's even in softback, so you have to pay the whole $25, whatever, in hardback. The other ones, if you want to have in paper book, if you want to have in Kindle, you want to have and it's an audio book, that's fine. The fourth one, though, I insist you buy it as a book. I insist that you treat it as a textbook. And if you're not ready to go to class and you don't want to do the studying that's required, don't. Don't kid yourself. If you're not going to do it, don't do it. But then you should get some assistance. Someone who knows this stuff. And I'm not talking about someone who's there to sell shit to you. One of the things I like to say is that there's a lot of people who get paid money to sell things to you. They don't have to understand what they're selling. They just have to sell. That's their job. The fourth book is, of course, Common Sense on Mutual Funds, written by John Bogle, the gentleman who founded Vanguard Mutual Fund Company. And like I said, it's a lot of numbers and graphs and charts, and maybe some of you love that. I know I sure did. And every once in a while, I'll flip back to it and find a new show topic idea. So it generates a lot of content for me. If you read those 4 books, you're not going to understand everything probably, but if you understand a lot of it and apply part of it, you're going to do way better than most investors. Well, now that we've got the books out of the way, the general investment philosophy for me is that if you're young, you want to be in stocks, 100% in stocks. That can be scary. That can be really scary because in 2008, the stock market went down 37% during that calendar year. You may recall way back to 2000 where the market over a year and a half to 2 years maybe lost 50% The NASDAQ index, I think, lost 75%. That can freak you out. But in the long run, every single time we've had a market crash, it has come back. Will it do that in the future? I don't know. I think so, but I can't guarantee it, of course. But that is how almost everyone you know has made a lot of money in the market, is buy and hold, invest. And one of the problems with trying to time the market is not only do you have to get out when it's at the top, you have to get back in when it's in the bottom. And even when you're right, you might have created so much tax burden on yourself that you still didn't benefit. I made a point a year ago. People were talking about the fourth quarter of 2018 when the market had fallen by the end of December close to 15, 18, 19% in just a couple of months, most of it in a couple of weeks. And there was a lot of gnashing of teeth and people freaking out and people pulling money out of the stock market. And I would tell people, don't do that. Not because I thought it was going to stop going down or not because I thought it was going to go up in January, but because the long-term average says you're better off adding money. Just keep doing it. Often I'll say I'm the tortoise in the tortoise and hare story, that just keep adding money. Long-term, just go. Now, we've made a lot of money in 2019. So does that mean you take out now? No. When it goes down, you keep adding. When it goes up, you keep adding. If anything, when it goes up a lot, you pull a little bit off the top. But a year that makes 25% is within the norm. 80-90% of the time, the market works within the ranges of -12 and +30. So we're still in the normal-ish range. It's a little high, but don't freak out about it. Just keep adding money. Now, so if you're young, stocks. Then, of course, you have to figure out international, domestic, large cap, small cap. I use index funds because the single biggest factor outside of what kind of investment, I like bonds versus stocks or domestic stocks versus international stocks. The single biggest driver of your long-term performance is cost, expense ratios. You want to keep those costs really, really low. And just a quick reminder, the published expense ratio of a mutual fund is not necessarily all expenses that apply to that fund. It's only the things that they're required by law to include within the category called expense ratio. So stocks. Now, when you start getting close to retirement, and what does that mean, close? Historically, I've used 10 to 12 years as when you start thinking about building what I call the cushion. My current recommendation is not 10 to 12, but 12 to 14 years, because in the last 10 years, we have made a lot of money in the stock market. Not predicting that it's going to go down. I think on average, it's going to continue to go up about 10%. But if you've made a lot of money in the last 10 years and you're getting to where you can start seeing retirement on the horizon, why not scoop a little bit off the top and protect it? Again, 12 to 14 years. So if you're the normal 65 age of retirement where you can get Medicare, which is a big deal for a lot of people because buying insurance off the street when you're 62 is a lot of money. So if it's 65 when you're 51 to 53, you should start building the cushion. Now, when I say start, so that's the next tricky question. At retirement, most people should have, give or take, 40, maybe a really large percentage is 50% of your money in bonds to make your portfolio more conservative. For a lot of people, 30% in bonds works. For some people, like my dad as an example, even at his death at the age of 81, he had 10% in bonds. Part of why he could do that is he had a couple different corporate pensions. He had Social Security. My mom had Social Security. They worked until a few years before they passed away, even though it's part-time. That makes a huge difference with your portfolio and your cash flow and your budget. And they also lived way below their means. So if you take way less out of your portfolio, more of it can be in stocks, because even if the market falls, you can still get all the dividends and you have some bonds to sell. So those are the ranges. I mean, you could have half your money in bonds. You could have 10% in bonds. For most people, without knowing anything different, I'm going to recommend 40%. And we're going to continue with that for the thought process of the rest of this segment. So 40%. So 14 years out, you don't want 40%. You want to get to 40% maybe 5 years away from retirement, 3 years away from retirement. If the market has just fallen 20 or 30 or 40%, maybe you don't need to get all those bonds until 1 or 2 years from retirement or even at retirement. The reason it's farther out now is because we've made so much money for so many years that maybe it's a little more possibility that some of the giant gains you've made in the last decade get paid back. So you want to have a little more caution. But assuming you want 40% at retirement, assuming 4 or 5 years out, you want that 40%. 10 years before that, we're going to call it 14 years from retirement. Maybe you should have 4 or 5% in bonds as a minimum. If you want to have 10 or 15 to feel a little safer, that's fine. And then every year, you tweak your portfolio just once a year. Once a year, you look at the whole thing, and the first thing you do is you start by rebalancing how much is in bonds. And you can add, 3 or 4% per year. So if you started with 4% the first year, then you have 7 or 8, then 12, then 16, then 20. You get the idea. And so that if your target is 40% 4 years before retirement, you do this gradual increase. The reason that we want to do it slowly is because if the market keeps going up over the next 10 or 12 years while you're getting ready for retirement, you get to keep making the bulk of the money because the bulk of your investments are in stocks. And that's the long-term answer. You don't stop investing when you retire, by the way. With a little luck, you're going to live 20, 30, 40 years past retirement. You're still a very long-term investor. So you want to have a considerable portion of your money in stocks. So you gradually increase that ratio of bonds. And of course, there's all kinds of different bonds. Regular listeners know that right now I am shying away from the category that is doing the best, which is long-term bonds, because the interest rates probably can't go really materially any lower, but they could go higher. And if interest rates go up, bonds go down. We've done other segments on that, so I'm not going to go into that detail here. So that's the basic philosophy. Then when you get to retirement, what you want to do, of course, you have your, let's just say, once a year rebalancing where you can go in and make some adjustments to your portfolio. And if the difference is, if everything is about where it was last year, you don't have to sell a bunch of stuff to buy a bunch of other stuff, especially if your money is in a taxable account. But if your ratios are off, you might consider it. You might want to do an adjustment. But you can look at the things that have done the best. In the last year, the Vanguard Index for large cap growth, I think right now, as of now, has made the most. So that might be a nice place to skim off $5,000 or $10,000. Of course, depending on the size of your portfolio and what your budget is. It might be international. A couple of years ago, international made 37%, at least emerging markets did. So that's a nice place to skim off of. So you create this habit where you're constantly adding money into things that are low with the rebalancing, working way up to retirement. And then you're pulling out in retirement and you're taking away from things that are high. So it's buying low and selling high, but not in days or weeks or months, but years and decades. So that's just some general philosophies of the whole thing, kind of all bundled together with the books you should read and the basic investment philosophies. So some things to think about. If you have a 401k and you're not sure what things to use in there, a target date is okay. It's not necessarily bad, but sometimes they're suboptimal. Generally, I like a target date 5 to 10 years, maybe even 15 years beyond your actual planned retirement, because they often get more aggressive in the bonds faster than I'd like. But you have to look at the specific bond, and you can pull it up on Morningstar.com by just typing in the symbol, the 5-digit letter. 5 letters are the symbol for that mutual fund. So you can check on Morningstar. But once you get to retirement, I really dislike target date funds. So building wealth, it's not so bad. But in retirement, they're horrible. Absolutely horrible, because you lose 100%. You lose what I call investment clarity. You can't see or control what types of assets that you own. The target date fund does all of that. Now, if you know absolutely nothing, okay, do a target date fund, because what they're doing is better than you knowing nothing and you not giving a shit. So it's better than that. But if you can read those books, if you can learn some things, you can then have that clarity where you have all these different funds and you can pull from the winners and not pull from the losers. If the stock market goes down, you still got stock dividends, bond dividends, you can sell some bonds. If you have a year like 2019 where stocks are up, don't touch the bonds, sell the stocks. You might even sell a little extra stock to make your percentage or total amount of bonds bigger. Depends on what you want to do. But you can do that on your own. The target date fund will never do that. The target date fund, if it's, let's say it's half stock and half bonds. If the bonds make 3% and the stock market falls 50%, the target date fund will still be down around 23, 24%. And when you pull money out, it's still at a big loss. Whereas if you had different investments, you could take money out of the bonds for a couple of years, maybe 10 or 12 years. That's a whole another segment on how the cushion works. You could do that for years while you wait for the stocks to come back. The end result, by having this clarity and the knowledge to know which parts of your portfolio to take money out of, you will have far more wealth in the long run than just with a target date fund. Anyway, some basic ideas, the 4 books to read, and general philosophies on how investment portfolios work and Phil's philosophy on it all. Hope you enjoyed. The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Your investments should be based on your situation, and you should consult with your financial advisor before taking any action. The show may contain ads. These ads are placed into the show by the hosting company after I finish recording and editing. I have little control over the content of the ads, and you should not assume that I support their products or claims. If you choose to support the show via the new Patreon page, that support does not create an advisor-client relationship.
Do you mind spending 30 seconds on dark matter just for the heck of it? So when we observe galaxies, we find that they're spinning around at such a rate that stars on the edge should be flung outwards, sort of like water droplets on a bicycle wheel that's spinning fast, the water gets flung out. Yeah. But the stars aren't getting flung out. Something must be holding them in. We don't see anything that can do that, but we know gravity has the power to hold things together. So we imagine that maybe there's some matter out there that we don't see, dark matter. That's why we don't see it. It doesn't give off light. And that matter is exerting a gravitational pull, holding those stars together in these spinning galaxies. And when we make that hypothesis, it explains observation so spectacularly well that we begin to gain confidence that maybe the stuff that we haven't yet seen and we haven't yet touched or smelled yet, maybe it's real. So we build big detectors and we try to capture one of these dark matter particles. We haven't succeeded yet, but I think that we will. So this is a beautiful example of how observations drive rational thinking to explain the facts and ultimately verify it through observation and experiment that can be replicated. That is what science is.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
All right, everybody. As promised, really special guest this week, my good longtime friend, David Fitzgerald. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Happy pre-Christmas.
Oh, I thank you. Happy Festivus and Cat Christmas or something like that, right?
All these things.
You have cats?
We have a cat or two. Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. What is the number, like 12 or 14? Or?
Down to a mere 10 cats and a dog at the moment.
I see. We have one cat, and its need for attention continually surprises me.
Well, let's see if we can get through this interview before cats around here have the same idea.
Well, I actually was able to record my cat purring because when she was really little, her purr was inaudible. You could feel her vibrate, but you could never hear it. But as she's gotten older, it's gotten more, I don't know what, vibrato, something like that. Well, I don't know. It's more audible. Anyway, we were just talking pre-show, which for our listeners doesn't exist. I mean, we did talk, but it's not saved. We were chatting about something we had worked on years ago, and I thought it would be fun to resurrect this quiz. And it turns out you wrote, at my request for a blog that I had way back then, in 2011 or older, this was the save date of this file.
Yeah.
You wrote the ultimate Christmas quiz. And I thought, you know what time of year is the best time for a Christmas quiz? Right around Christmas.
Wow. Let's do it.
So I sent you a copy because I was able to find it before you did. Let's just start from number one, and maybe during the show we'll randomly pick a couple of these, and we're going to see if maybe I can fit this on Facebook or post it somewhere, and we'll reshare it just for laughs. But the first question is, what year was Jesus born? And if you don't mind, I will read off the options, and then we can discuss it.
Sure.
That sounds good to you? Okay, it's A, B, C, D, and E. So everyone reading at home, make sure you don't do this while you're driving, but if you have pen and paper ready, you can keep score along with us when we're just going to do a couple. What year was Jesus born? A, we don't know for sure since the Gospels disagree irreconcilably. B, we don't know for sure, but the Gospels agree it was during the reign of Herod the Great, died around 4 BC. C, we don't know for sure, but the Gospels agree it was when Quirinius was governor of Syria, 6 AD, and if I understand my BCs and ADs correctly, that's like a 10-year span. D, we don't know for sure, but the Gospels agree it was the year the moon was in the 7th house of Jupiter, aligned with Mars. That sounds familiar.
Right?
E, of course, the year 0. So, give our listeners a moment to think about those choices. Yeah, exactly. And then, David, would you share with us the secret answer?
For those playing at home, the actual answer is A. We don't know for sure since the Gospels disagree irreconcilably.
Now,
Matthew is the one that tells us it happened during the reign of Herod the Great, and Luke says it was when Quirinius was governor, which is a 10-year gap between those two things.
Wow. And so it wasn't the whole 7th house of Jupiter aligned with Mars?
No, that is from the Broadway musical Hair, of course.
Is that from Hair?
Can't be the year 0 for the simple reason that there is no year 0.
Oh.
It goes -1 to 1.
I don't think I
BC to
ever
180.
knew that or thought about that, but that's interesting.
Yep.
So if you were born in the year 0, you never have a birthday.
Right. Well, and the funny thing about the whole BC and AD thing is that was, even from the get-go, that was always based on guesswork. So no one has really thought that it matched up to Jesus's birthday for a long, long time.
Now didn't some guy with way too much time on his hands figure out the exact day of the creation of the earth? Isn't that
right? That was a bishop in Ireland, actually, Bishop Usher, if I remember correctly.
Usher, yes.
And it was like 6,000 something AD at 5:34 in the morning. He like pinned it down to like the day, the time of the morning. That just cracked me up.
I think that's someone who had way too much time on their hands.
Way too much.
Every once in a while, you got to go outside of the monastery and garden and maybe count the number of peas in a pea pod.
Let's continue.
Indeed. Now, part of the reason that you did this quiz is because you have a couple of books on the subject of religion. Do you have a list in front of you, or?
I think I can probably rattle off the most relevant ones.
Yes, talk to us.
The book I think that I'm most well known for originally is called Nailed: 10 Christian Myths That Show Jesus Never Existed at All. And again, no hyperbole. I'm not trying to be provocative. I really don't think the guy existed. Full stop.
Yeah. Fair enough. And then there was a follow-up with that, but you couldn't fit it in one book?
The thing with Nailed pretty much showed the top 10 ways that the official story of Christianity just doesn't pass water. It just doesn't hold up when you look closely at it. But it didn't really say where I thought Christianity actually came from, and that's in the book Jesus, Mything and Action, Volume 1, 2, and 3. Again, there's nothing implausible about the fact that Jesus was a real person. There certainly were plenty of messiahs around the time. It's just that the more we look into what we can know for sure about Jesus, the less it looks like there was an actual person involved at all. And the more it looks like that even if there had been an actual guy who started Christianity, for all extents and purposes, he's not there anymore, because everything that we think we know about him, the so-called biographical information, is not connected to anyone who actually existed.
Fair enough.
To Dr. Robert Price for making that observation a long time ago.
Nice. Yeah, so probably didn't exist, and if he did, what of it?
Right. And again, honestly, after looking at this for 20 years, I don't see how he could have existed. There's just no room for him in all the conflicting information that we get. And it's like, even the way, not just the way what they were saying, not just what our texts say, but the way Christianity unfolded and the way it evolved, is we can see this thing evolving long before Jesus' alleged lifetime, coming out of these religious movements and going into the 1st and 2nd and 3rd century.
And so it's not one of those things where, what is that phrase? The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Right.
However, you don't have an absence of evidence.
We don't have an absence.
You have a lot of evidence that points to something else happened, and the story that's in the Bible, by its own conflict, couldn't have happened. I mean, you can't.
Exactly.
Was it Dan Barker who made the famous bet that you can't create one single linear narrative from the four Gospels?
His Easter challenge, which is so brilliant. He says, here's the challenge. Tell me what happened on Easter Day. Here's the only rule. You can't leave out anything that's in the four Gospels. And it's like, when you do that, it just gets ridiculous trying to harmonize them all. And it's a non-starter, really, because if the Gospel of John is correct, Jesus was killed on a completely different day than all the other Gospels. And there's just, I mean, they dogpile on each other so much, the contradictions, that you really can't do anything with it.
Well, it's funny because since you brought that up, I'm just going to jump to question 2 here on this list. According to the Gospels, what day was Jesus born?
Mm-hmm.
A, December 25th. B, December 24th. C, no date was given in any Gospel. D, the date of the winter solstice. E, the 3rd night of Hanukkah.
We'll take a moment for the folks at home.
That's right. Pull over. Don't do this while driving. It's very unsafe. And what do you think? What answer are we going to go with?
Well, all of them are good guesses. The 25th, 24th, the day of winter solstice. But in fact, there is no date given in any gospel whatsoever. In fact, 2 of the gospels don't mention his birth at all. And originally, Christians didn't celebrate birthdays. That was something heathens did. For them, being born into this world was nothing to celebrate, because this is just sin and fleshiness. What mattered to them was leaving it. So they celebrated their feast days of saints on the days of their glorious martyrdom. And it wasn't until about the 3rd or 4th century that Christians began pushing for a birthday for their God too. Yeah, and so much, in fact, that they actually stole the date from, almost gave it away.
No way. From Saturnalius?
Let's go to question 3.
Is that in 3?
Yeah.
Let's see, what is 3? Oh, see, not maybe I did give it away. What pagan holiday did Christians borrow to celebrate Jesus' birthday? The Greek Brumalia festival, the Roman feast of Saturnalia. Wink, wink. C. Dies Natus Solus Invicta.
Dies Natalis Solus Invicti. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you know more what you're saying.
Unconquered sun.
D. All of the above. E. None of the above. Boy, I kind of like the all or none questions in these quizzes you made, but I'm going to stick with my Saturnalius thing because that's what I think. But tell me, am I right or wrong?
Saturnalia is a really good guess. The answer is it's every single one of those and then some.
See, I knew it. I knew there was some deviousness.
We're not wrong. Throughout the ancient pre-Christian world, there's so many gods and so many festivals of that same period, for reasons I get into in my Christmas talk. But Mithra, Sol, Gabalal, Frey, Dionysus, Adonis, Horus, and that's just the Mediterranean basin. In Scandinavia, in places far flung as Inca, Peru, and China, all around the world there was celebrations of the winter festival, and it all hinged on that time of the solstice when the sun started coming back.
I like it. Now I notice I'm on the Amazon page.
Yeah.
And I see Jesus Mything in Action Part Volume 1, 2, and 3, and they're on Kindle for $6.66.
Isn't that so weird? It just worked out that way.
What a coincidence. Which, by the way, listeners, that's the top tier level for my Patreon page, patreon.com/Phil. And then you did a book on Mormons?
I did do a book on Mormons. And in fact, as soon as I finish our time travel trilogy, I'll be working on a book on the Jehovah's Witnesses next year as well.
Or will it just be called J-Dubs?
I think it's going to be called, and you're hearing this first, Fun with Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh, that is unexpected.
Yep. Yeah, because I think when you're talking about a group like the Jehovah's Witnesses, you really have to think out of the box and tackle them in a way that you wouldn't. The Mormon book pretty much wrote itself because they've been able to cram so much history in less than 200 years. I had to deliberately stop myself from making it a whole encyclopedia. But the Jehovah's Witnesses is a different animal, and I think it takes a different approach. So,
yeah, because that's a different breed of American crazy, and
a different breed of American crazy for sure.
And why is it all these religions have to have something about the end is coming any day now? What that seems such a trendy thing.
And get it wrong constantly over and over again. And even though they get it wrong, the survivors just double down and say, "Oh, it was a spiritual end of the world or something." And the gymnastics they have to do to keep it going fascinate me. And it's like there's whole studies of all these different cults that have done this. And I'm trying to remember how long ago. Was it 2013? The most recent one for that it happened so long ago I can't even remember his name now, but he had a whole little radio empire.
Oh yeah.
Blasted out that the end of the world was coming, and sure enough went, and whoop,
they
still there.
They were the ones you stole that line. It was a spiritual apocalypse. Or something like that, where they're like, okay, I guess we misunderstood then.
Yes, yeah. It's funny when you were talking about the lava cakes and bombs and the everyone gnashing teeth. We didn't realize that was all going to be spiritual lava and earthquakes.
Spiritual lava
destruction.
Does it make a spiritual island in the middle of the Pacific?
Literally, it does. Clearly, it does, because the Lord works in mysterious ways, apparently.
And mysterious inverse lava is Atlantis.
Ah, there you go. See, it all comes full circle.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, it does. That's nice. So the Mormon thing.
Wait a second. Before we leave it, because you just made me think of something really interesting.
Yeah.
This whole idea of, it was a spiritual victory is really at the heart of the origins of Christianity to begin with. Because back in the first century, it was the destruction of Jerusalem that really put Christianity on the map. Everything about the early Christianity hinged on that destruction. And we think the Gospel of Mark, the first gospel, was actually written right in response to that. And that's what launched Christianity into a whole new period than it was beforehand.
So Christianity didn't start at year zero?
It did not start at year zero. In fact, it may have started, in fact, if you read Jesus Mything in Action, we actually go back about 300 years before the year zero, the non-existent year zero, to see some of the evolutionary steps that Christianity took.
So I think these books, so for the average 16-year-old or 18-year-old who accidentally picks up Ayn Rand, you'd be much better off reading one of these books.
I think so.
I think so. And it's obviously that you're making a fortune at $6 a book.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet getting this atheist money going. Yeah.
Yeah. That's nice.
It's pretty awesome.
So you see, you got the whole Jesus thing, you got the Mormons eventually.
Yep. Got the Mormon money, got the Jesus money. It's pretty sweet here in Daveland. Yep.
I like it.
And another. Don't let the fact we work two jobs fool you. Nope. It's pretty sweet.
The other book that you did, again, something totally different, and you did this with your wife. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
And tell us, I know it's Dana. What is her last name?
Or Dana Fredsti. Dana Fredsti. The first book was Time Shards. Is that correct? Yes, and the trilogy itself is called Time Shards as a whole.
I see. And part 2 just came out?
A few months ago, and part 3 will come out this time next year.
Oh, I gotta wait another year?
Not quite another year, but it'll get there.
I'm trying to think, why doesn't this Amazon page link directly to... Grr. But what's the second one called?
Second one is called Shatter War.
That's right.
And the third one, which was originally going to be called Shatterfield, is going to be called Tempest Fury.
Oh?
Yeah.
All righty. Well, just earlier today, I finished Shatter War.
Woohoo!
And I was so excited because I knew it was out, and as you said, a few months ago, but only a few days ago did the audiobook come out.
That's right. That's right.
I have attention deficit issues, and I have a really hard time sitting and reading for more than like 5 or 10 minutes. But I can do an audiobook when I'm walking. I actually did some of it while I was playing Frisbee golf this afternoon. But whoa, what a fun romp. And I tell you what, the other thing, if people are into audiobooks at all, and okay, so I'm talking to the listeners that like audiobooks. So first of all, not only is it beautifully done, but every person has a different voice. Now, I don't know if you had like 30 people do the voices or...
Isn't it amazing? That is the work of Aaron Shedlock from Tantor Audio, who is just this black belt in audio narration. We're really pleased to have him.
Did one person do all the voices?
One person did all the voices.
How is that? And it's... So, okay, first of all, how? Okay.
And we're throwing like 15 different languages in each book at him.
See, that's the other thing. And I know we talked about this when the first book came out, but when I don't want to spoil the book. Okay, so
sure.
Let's just say theoretically you went to Egypt.
Right.
Way back at some time. You have all these different languages, and I know you, and I know Dana a little, but I know you're going to be obsessive, and you're not going to put something in the book until you've researched the shit out of it.
And you know what's funny about that is, I mean, I'm mostly known for my nonfiction books. I like to go back and forth between doing fiction projects and nonfiction projects because they're very different uses of your brain. Like with fiction, you don't have to make anything up, but you have to make sure all your facts line up, and you have to have citations and footnotes and stuff. With fiction, you don't have to do any of that, but you have to invent it all in your head. So with a book like Time Shards, where it's this time travel post-apocalyptic world mashup, let me back up just a little bit, explain what the idea of the book is. The idea of the book is that this cataclysm strikes in the 23rd century, shatters the timeline, and our heroes come from all these different times. There's a girl from San Diego, a guy from first century, a British Celt from the first century, World War II commando, some Victorians, all these different people from different times and places are thrown together in this post-apocalyptic England where you don't know whether you're going to bump into a dinosaur next or a robot or, a knight in shining armor. And so all the history had to be spot on, and all the language had to be spot on. So it was the worst of both worlds from a writing perspective. We had to both make everything up and do all our homework and make sure we had it right. I
was just going to say that this was kind of both of those things, because the story plot is fiction and you have to make it up. But when you put the characters in an environment, you want that environment to be as realistic as possible.
And I'm so pleased that critics and readers have commented about what a good job they thought we did of that. I'm really pleased. I'm actually I love my nonfiction books, but I think I'm the most proud of this trilogy of anything we've ever done, just because it has been such a labor of love and so hard to get right. And when I'm writing it, it feels like it's the worst piece of crap ever. It's terrible. It's never going to work. When I'm reading it, a year later, it's like, oh, this is so beautiful. I love this book. I love our book.
Well, and it's kind of neat because because of the plot design, the story design, the story idea, and I don't know where this came from, but you can go to almost anywhere and any time.
Yep.
And you do.
And we do. And I was going to say, from book 1 to book 2 to book 3, the story gets bigger and bigger, and it's I don't want to give any spoilers.
Yeah.
But yeah, it goes to places you wouldn't expect, and there's things happening. It's like, I don't remember that happening in our history. Where is this coming from?
Yeah.
So it gets even stranger than just this jigsaw puzzle of different times.
Because I know that I was listening and I was going through it at 150% speed to make sure that I got it all under my belt before the show. And we're going. I'm like, how much time do I have left? And then it ended, and I was pissed because I knew there was a third. But I was like, no, you can't stop there. God damn it. So now I have to wait a year for the next one.
Yeah. Yeah. You are not the first person to tell me that was their biggest complaint about the book is, I want more right now. Right now.
And it's neat because I did notice the artwork for the cover. That's pretty sexy.
Yeah, they did a good job. Yeah.
They did a really nice job.
And book 3's cover is in the very same line, so they all three of them look really sharp together.
Is the third one green?
Third one is kind of a yellow gold.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that coming. Because it's red and blue, and I'm like, where do you go next? Green. Okay, yellow gold. Yeah. And is that already written?
It is almost. It's about 3/4 written, but it's due in about 20 days. So. We gotta jump on that puppy.
So Merry fucking Christmas to you.
Exactly. I actually literally it's about a month and a half we have. I believe the deadline, the hard deadline, is January 20th, and I thought actually we'd be done last May. That's how long it's taken to get it right.
Yeah, because this one, let's see, I don't know if it has a published date, but you said it was a few months ago. The audiobook was a few days ago.
Yeah.
You can get a paperback, Kindle, audiobook, and audiobook was only $7.50. The Kindle's only $8, and even the paperback's not too expensive. It's $13 something. When did
You're right. Yes, Phil, those are so cheap. What a perfect Christmas gift they would make as well.
And it would be delivered in time.
You're not wrong.
And you know what? I honestly think that for tweens, and maybe even a little younger. I mean, it has a little bit.
I was going to say maybe not too much younger because there's not a lot of sex, but there is a lot of violence.
Yeah, I know, and it's so it's something for the parents to be cognizant of. But I know, particularly when our son was reading books when he was like 8 and 9 and reading these like 500-page books.
Yeah.
They had all that stuff, like the battles and dragons and fights and magic and stuff. So depending on you and your preferences, there is some graphic content. There's some
nothing super hard R or anything, but there's some pretty scary parts here and there, and they get in some jams that are pretty hair raising.
Yeah, so that was fun, and then of course the other part you got to have a little adventure with is the future tech stuff, which I will not spoil, but the what would we call it? I'll just call it the disc. Was pretty cool, and I'll just leave it at that. You may not even know what I'm talking about for sure.
I'm not sure I do.
Yeah.
Are you thinking of the thing with a thing?
Yeah. I'm thinking of the bigger disc. But
when we
see now, the listeners are just going to have to get it.
No, I'm going to have to think about this. I think I know what you're talking about. But...
Yeah. The disc that can hold things inside of it.
Gotcha.
Okay.
More of a sphere? Are we talking about?
Yeah. I guess. I guess.
Okay.
I envisioned it being a different shape. So yes, spherical.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Or maybe we're thinking about something completely different. Is it something that's possibly named after a Polynesian nation state?
Maybe. I do know that it could poop out a bicycle.
Gotcha. Yeah.
How's that?
There you go. Yeah, I wouldn't call it a disc. I wouldn't call it a sphere. It's just basically spaceship shaped, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. So maybe I just pictured it in my head what I thought of it.
It's all right.
But yeah, so that's cool. What else should we go over? What else are you doing?
What else are we doing? This just in, I just got asked by John Loftus and Robert Price to contribute to an upcoming anthology, or rather collection of essays on the different types, the varieties of mythicism. And I'm not sure how much I can say about that, since I don't think it's been pitched yet. So we'll shut up about that. But that's something to be exciting to look for next year.
Well, just is it just the three of you, or are they going to get a whole crew?
No. There's a ton of us. There's a ton of people involved.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've read any other of John Loftus's.
I have. I know him personally.
But they are amazing. And Robert Price is such a black belt in biblical studies. It's just really an honor to be asked to be part of that.
I know you won't disagree, but if you're curious about the history of Christianity and religion in general, pretty much anything by John Loftus and Robert Price are going to be well worth your time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm especially intrigued about this one because they're really touching all the bases of current thought in mythicism, even the people I radically disagree with.
And so for my listeners who may not know, what is mythicism?
Gotcha. So I kind of touched on this earlier when we were talking about the book Nailed.
Sure.
Mythicism, Jesus mythicism, is the idea that, you know what, Christianity began not because there was a guy in Galilee who's preaching all these things, but because there was what was called a mystery faith. This was this religious movement that began during Alexander the Great's empire, the Hellenistic period. And this movement was very widespread, and it involved a savior god. And usually they would take an existing god like Mithras in Persia or Isis in Egypt, and they would reboot them as a personal savior. This idea of a personal savior was a brand new sexy idea in religion that was completely replacing all the old tired state pantheons. And when you look at what these mystery faiths are and ask yourself, I wonder if the Jews ever did that, would that look like? Well, it would look exactly like Christianity. Spoiler alert.
Fair enough. I just remembered, I still have this list. I'm going to jump to number 9 on the quiz.
Uh-oh.
Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Which of these traditional Christmas elements were originally pagan? Now, I love this because I love throwing into Christians' face when they say, Christmas is all about Christ. I'm like, really? That's a new thing. So which of these traditional Christmas elements were originally pagan? A, Christmas trees. B, Yule log.
Wait. We're skipping around. Let's give the whole thing. Let's give the whole thing.
I thought I was. Christmas trees, Yule logs, the birth of the Savior, boughs of holly, springs of mistletoe. E, gotcha. All of the above.
Gotcha. And I'll just run to the complete list super fast. It's Christmas trees, Christmas wreaths, Yule logs, caroling, Christmas ham, Christmas candles, the birth of the Savior, boughs of holly, and sprigs of mistletoe. And the winner is... Any guesses? Any guesses?
I don't know.
Every single one of them.
I see what happened. The question doesn't have all the choices that the answer does.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not too many fir trees in the Holy Land. And you know, they usually don't put astrological symbols on them. And but it's so funny that in Northern Europe in pre-Christian times, the pagan Midwinterfest, Yule, became so associated with Christmas that I think most people don't realize that Yule was originally a completely pagan holiday that had nothing to do with Christmas at all. And yet so much of what we think of as Christmas comes straight from Yule. Christmas trees, Yule logs.
So some of the elements of our traditional Christmas are borrowed from pagan festivals.
Yep. And it's funny, there's a really interesting paradox about the way Christmas is celebrated in America and Europe, or in England, the UK, is that so much of it is borrowed from the pagans, and at the same time, much of it was invented from the time of Dickens to the early 20th century. So in some ways, it's a completely new holiday, and in other ways, it's completely pre-Christian.
Because
such a weird mishmash of things.
Didn't the vast majority of Christians or leaders of Christianity actually tell people to not celebrate Christmas for the longest time?
Yeah. The church father Origen said, oh, no, you can't celebrate the Savior's birthday like he was a pharaoh or something. That's what heathens did. They didn't no birthdays at all, let alone their saviors.
And there, wasn't there a tree thing about not cutting down a tree?
Tertullian in the 3rd century, he actually explicitly condemns the practice of decorating the house with boughs or for lights, saying that's like dressing up your house like a heathen brothel, or a temple. And of course, the winter solstice was so linked with so many sun gods and savior gods that early Christian fathers like Justin Martyr and Firmicus Maternus said, "Oh well, what happened is clearly the coming of Christianity by reading the prophecies in the scriptures, since they're so clear, crystal cut and clear."
Yeah,
and he saw it coming, and he created all these counterfeit Christianities centuries before the real Christianity arrived.
Yeah, it's kind of like fan fiction got out of control.
Super. And it's like, that is got to be the lamest excuse of Christianity ever to come out of everything.
No.
And it's so funny to hear apologists today, they would never use that argument. They act like, oh, the pagans stole everything from Christianity. It's you never see early church fathers try to say anything so ridiculous as that.
Now, do you know who came up with the red suit for Santa?
I believe the good people of Coca-Cola, if I'm not mistaken.
That's my understanding. And
yes.
Do you know who came up with Rudolph?
Oh, I don't know. Probably a Jew.
No, it was the Montgomery Ward's Company.
Really?
Yeah, they had a little pamphlet that they handed out before Christmas one year that invented the entire story of Rudolph.
Too funny.
So, I mean, talk about modern day stories. I mean, we're talking 50, 70 years ago.
Yep.
And we keep adding new weird things to Christmas every year.
It is funny how amazingly secular the whole thing has gotten now.
It's amazing.
And yet, so much of it appeared right out of the Victorian era. Yeah.
Yeah, and people think that it's for 2,000 years been a special Christmas celebration or a Christian celebration, and they just I guess I'm not too surprised by Americans at this point that they don't understand where things came from or how the world works. But I'll go off on that topic. Forgive me.
You know what's funny about Saint Nick himself? Santa Claus is, of course, supposed to be Saint Nicholas of Myra, this Byzantine bishop from the 4th century. But the funny thing about him...
Was that a cat?
Well, I was going to say, the funny thing about him is when you look at the information we have for him, it's not that great either. And it doesn't start appearing until centuries after the fact. So even Saint Nick himself is probably a pure myth.
That's absolutely awesome. Well, I think we've covered everything plus what I wanted to do. And of course, listeners, go search David Fitzgerald at your favorite bookstore or online. Time Shards, and the second in the book series is Shatter War. And you thought the third one's going to be called what?
Third war is going to be called Tempest Fury.
Tempest Fury. And of course, there's Nailed and Jesus Mything in Action. Pardon?
Yep. Jesus Mything in Action.
Jesus Mything in Action, the book on Mormons, and the forthcoming. When does the Jehovah's Witness one come out?
I'm going to be working on that at the same time I'm working on the Sex and Violence in the Bible book. And that'll probably be that. This depends how quick I can finish the stuff on my plate now. I'll probably be doing the legwork for both of those next year, and it'll probably come out in 21, I suppose.
Because you've done a few well-received talks that have a title similar to Sex in the Bible and Bible, Sex and Violence.
The book is coming directly out of that talk, and it's a super fun talk. It's probably my favorite talk I've ever given.
I like it. If someone wants you to talk at their local group, regional conference, national conference, how can they reach you?
That would be lovely. You can find me pretty easily on Facebook, or you can shoot me an email at everybodylovesdave@gmail.com, and I'd be more than happy to give a talk on just about any topic you like.
I appreciate it. And I do think I heard a cat in the background there. At least I hope that was a cat.
That was a cat. I'm surprised that we haven't had more. There's 2 of them sleeping in my lap as we speak.
Oh, and that's nice.
Now there's 2 of them talking up in the kitchen.
Yay. Well, David, thank you. It's so great to have you here. And I was so shocked when I was doing the research how long we've actually known each other. How did that happen? Where did the years go?
Days drag and years fly.
Well, everybody, that's David Fitzgerald. Thank you again for being on the Phil Ferguson Show.
My pleasure, Phil. Take care, and give my love to all Mrs. Phil and the little Phils.
Will do. Thanks again.
You're listening to the Phil Ferguson Show.
I do hope you enjoyed our little Christmas quiz and, of course, our discussions about David Fitzgerald's books. Maybe you can go out and get one just in time for Christmas. Of course, if you have any questions about your portfolio or how investments work, you may email me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. And like I said early in the show, I'm taking a 2-month pause on new clients to do some reorganizing of everything that I do to try to make myself more efficient, and then hopefully I have some room for a few more clients in 2020. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it very much. I know this is just a quick little short thing. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/Phil. Couldn't get much easier than that. You can donate a few bucks there. And I thank you for your time. Have a fantastic Christmas.